All right, everybody, thanks for coming. Welcome to Denver. My name is Jesse Sanders, and this is Cypress visual testing. We're going to use closed caption today. We may have somebody here that has a disability that this would help them with, so it'll be interesting to see what that comes up with. So my name is Jesse Sanders. I'm the CEO and founder of a local consulting company here called Freebo. We just did Angular Denver about 2 weeks ago. Brought about 50 speakers in from all over the world. And that's my email address, and that is my Twitter account. I'll do my best to respond to questions or whatnot, usually within 24 hours. All right, so what is visual testing? Well, let's start with this. Who knows about Cypress? Okay, about half or a little more, great. Who's using Cypress right now? A little bit smaller, all right. Who's done visual testing in the past? Okay, even smaller kind of ish, all right. So visual testing is something that's not all that common, and the tooling historically hasn't really been all that good to be able to do it. And so I think a lot of people want to know, like, what is visual testing? Why would I do it? So really the main thing here is we want to detect and view the visual changes. We want to manually, right now what happens is it's a manual comparison, right? So what it typically looks like is we have a QA person that has two monitors, and they pulled up the dev environment, the test environment, and they're trying to do a visual comparison between the two to try to figure out what's changed. But visual bugs are really hard to catch. Like I'm horrible at it. I'm colorblind. I don't really notice little minor changes that are really small, a couple pixels here and there. Like that doesn't jump out at me. So the interesting thing here is that we spend a lot of time writing unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests to find issues within our programs, but why aren't we doing the visual tests? So how does visual testing actually work? It's actually a really simple concept. We're going to get a base image that we're going to store off, and that's going to be what we're going to compare against. And then we're going to take a new snapshot of that and then compare it. With some of the tools out there, we get a little bit of variance or tolerance that allows us to say, hey, if it's within X, that's totally acceptable. So what problem does this actually solve? Why would we do this? So one is visual change control. So right now, there's really no way without a visual testing to make sure that nothing's changed within the application, that we haven't had something accidentally, someone goes in and says, hey, I need to change a little bit of CSS, and it's only going to affect this one area, and accidentally we affect the entire application. Like, who's had that happen, right? That's not a lot of fun. So we can use this to test and validate complex user interactions, and especially when we talk about graphs. Like, how would you test a graph right now without a visual testing tool? There's real no good way to say, hey, yes, that is correct or it's not correct, except for doing a manual comparison. Any sort of dashboards, if we want to verify layouts or images, all these things are really not handled by our traditional testing tools. So, and the other thing that happens is that developers change stuff. I don't really like the way that looks, so I'll go ahead and modify the CSS a little bit. I don't really care, and this is actually another way that we can verify and make sure that we don't have somebody going off and doing rogue things outside of what we're trying to do in the organization. All right, so what tools are available? We're gonna talk about two. I know there's multiple tools out there, but we're really gonna talk about two. We're gonna look at what the manual process looks like, what I call the Yugo. Does anybody remember what a Yugo is? A couple of you? All right. So Yugo was a very cheap car made in Yugoslavia that I think you could buy for like $4,000. It basically was the equivalent of cardboard doors, car doors. It was not a great vehicle, but it would get you from point A to point B. And then we're going to look at the Cadillac, and the Cadillac in this case is Percy IO. Anybody heard of Percy? A couple? All right, great. All right, so the Cypress visual regression tool, this is a plugin for Cypress. It's available through NPM. It uses the pixel match library, and it allows us to capture baseline images, and we can compare those images, and it'll fail the test if things are different. It is literally the Yugo for visual testing. You're going to manually have to go in and look at the images to see if there is a problem. Actually, what happens is when they do fail, it'll throw an error, but it won't tell you which one really. Like you'll have to go out and look and figure it out. There's no workflow with this, but it is available. So to install it, we just do an npm install, Cypress Visual Regression, save that to our dev dependencies, And then we've got to do a little bit of configuration. So we need to tell Cypress about it. The Cypress by default doesn't know anything. And so one, we add a couple of configuration pieces to the Cypress JSON file, tell it where the snapshots are going to be located at. Then we go ahead and wire up the plugin. And then we actually have to add the command so it knows how to call the plugin. So a couple little things that we need to configure here, but it's relatively simple to get going. And then when I write my test, in my case here, I'm going out to Amazon.com. I can say Cypress compare snapshot. So it's now added that command to the Cypress object, and I give it a name of home, and it will go ahead and capture an image, name it home, and when it goes to do the next comparison, it'll compare the home image, base with the home image of current. So to run it, we use npx cypress run. We first need to run a base test. So we say our type is base, and then I need to change the config and set the screenshots folder and manually tell it Cypress snapshots base. So that'll go ahead and store off those. And the next time I run it to do the comparisons, it's pretty much the same syntax. Obviously, I don't have to do the config there. And I'm just saying, hey, now we're doing a type that's actual. Now it's going to do the comparisons. So let's take a look at what it actually gives us. So in this case here, I've got what my baseline was on the left. I've got what my current is in the middle. And on the right, pretty much everything's changed, except for the one iPhone image there. So the thing with this Cypress visual regression tool, this works great locally on a developer machine. I can go ahead and pull up the images, I can see them. It's really, really nice. The challenge here is if I run this these regression tests or these visual tests up on, let's say, Circle CI. Now here's where the manual part starts. I have to log into that instance that was running and get the images and download them local to my machine so that now I can look at them. So there's nothing here, there's no sort of workflow that would actually allow me to walk through this. I'm going to be manually doing this. The great thing is this is 100% free. I don't have to pay anything for this, and I can do it today. And it's completely platform agnostic. You can run it with server-side, renderers, ASP.NET, Rails or something, or, Angular, React, Vue, doesn't matter. So let's talk about Percy. So Percy IO is the soup to nuts solution, or what I call the Cadillac, okay? So this is gonna store the images up on the cloud. It's going to integrate, if we want to, directly with GitHub in our PR process. We can have an approval process workflow. So now when things don't match up, I can have the head of QA or whoever's responsible for this going in and looking at the things that are failing and decide whether or not these should pass or not. And then prevent my PR from actually going into the branch until that approval has happened. And also it's got some features like auto approves on specific branches like master if you want to do that. There's a lot of configuration that you can do. So to install Percy, it's pretty simple. We do npm install and we install the Percy Cypress library. In the commands, all I have to do is just say import Percy Cypress, and that's it. So I didn't have to configure a command. I didn't have to go do a whole bunch of stuff, jump through hoops here. One simple line to do the import, and now, much like the other one of doing a snapshot, now I have a command called Cypress Percy snapshot, and that handles it for me. To run Cypress with Percy, I say npx Percy execute -- Cypress run. So this will go ahead and fire up Percy and then fire up Cypress, and it will go ahead and run my tests against the site. Our test here looks almost exactly identical, except for just a different command name on the Cypress object. So very, very simple. What I like about this with visual testing, by the way, is that I can be writing regular Cypress tests and then decide, hey, these are the ones I want to have snapshots on. I don't have to have it on every test per se, but I might want to say, oh, let's do on these 10 different tests here that are on each different feature that I get at least one snapshot on each one of those so that we'll have some sort of visual comparison. And I can add this to an existing suite of tests with just the one line of code, and now I have visual testing. So Percy.io, it's very simple. You go in to the website, you sign up for an account, you create a project, and you get a Percy token. So the token is what tells Percy what project that these images are going to be associated with. If you don't add the token to your command line, then it's gonna come back and say that it's missing the token and it won't actually run the test, the visual parts. So to create a new project, we'll actually pull up the website here in a minute, but to create a new project, I go in and say create a new project, I give it a name, and then it's gonna give me a key. It's also got really great documentation on how I integrate with any number of platforms, React, Angular, Vue, so on and so forth. They've got really good instructions there. They've also started marrying this with Storybook. Anybody using Storybook currently? Okay, great. So I actually noticed today that they had updated all their instructions for integrations and recommending that people use Storybook. So here's our token. This is actually a real token here. So export Percy token, I put that onto the command line, and then I go ahead and execute it and it runs. So what do I get? It actually looks very similar to what we were getting before. I get what my baseline is, and then this is my what my current is, and I can toggle back and forth between that. So really nice and easy to be able to see what visually has changed. Anything in the red, we've got changes there. So as I said earlier, the other nice thing here with Percy is that we can integrate this directly with GitHub. And so you can see in this case here that my CI service stuff passed, and then we had master tester go in and do the approval on the Percy workflow. So in this case here, we had some changes. We had to have somebody go in and approve that before the PR could be merged. So this is all great. We've just kind of been talking about top level sort of stuff. So would you like to actually see it like in action? And let's kind of play around with it here. Great. So one, I have a website here. This is it's all being run local. I'll make it just a little bit bigger. That's probably pretty good. This website is a kind of a play website called ngdoc.io, and we use this for a lot of demos to demonstrate testing and whatnot. So what this site is just a bunch of articles, and then for Angular, and then you could come over here and sort them and or filter them and whatnot. This is actually not really doing any filtering. I'm just using a local JSON server and running this all just locally here to make it nice and simple. All right, so we'll come back to this because we're going to start to make some changes to this site right here, and we'll see then what that does and how that impacts. So we come over here. Here's Percy. So here, if we go to Freebo, you can see I've got 3 different projects. I've got my new project, ngdoc, there's Cypress Percy. If I want to create a new project, I can just say ABC, create project. And now here's all my setup guides. So I get a lot of information here on how I can get this set up quickly for my project and be able to start running tests in a matter of minutes. So with this then, also under integrations, here's my Percy token. So if I were to do this, I'd go ahead and copy. And if I were to pull up another terminal, I would just say export and then paste this in and hit enter. And that would go ahead and export that variable and make it available. And then we'd be able to run our tests. Great. And let's get back over to Freebo. Let's go here, my new project. You see here, I ran it about 2 hours ago and I ran it about 34 minutes ago. It had no changes. I can go ahead and click here. I can view what's here. I can look at it for what it looks like in a mobile environment versus what it looks like full screen. Let's see here. I can download it, whatnot. So pretty simple interface here, but this isn't really showing you much because we don't have any changes. You're not really seeing anything, so there's no changes to review up here. So let's make some changes. So one of the things that I want to do, probably the easiest change, is I'm going to pull up my developer tools here. And so I've got this search button, div search button. Great. And I can see this is in my home search. All right. So we're going to go over here to my code, app, home. Great. And I'm going to go find where's my search button? Here. The right thing here. search button. Oh, it's not on home, it's in home search. There we go. All right. I'm not finding that. All right, we'll probably just. Yeah, right.
I think you just do, yeah, you go to the file. Command T.
Which one?
P.
Command P.
I'm not following you there.
Command.
Article filter, articles. Wow. All right, so let's just find something here that we can work with. There's the home search. Good definition. Great. There we go. Let me go back up to our files. Oh, got a tag search, all right. Great, so inside of here, my search button, let's go ahead and change the color on it. Black. All right, so let's go verify that that actually changes it. So now it's black. We hover over it, it goes back to green. Okay, great. All right, so now what I want to do is go ahead and rerun my tests so that I can see how this impacted. So, terminal. There we go. I close the whole thing last time. Let's go over here. So I've already added the token earlier and ran the test. So I'm going to go ahead and re-execute the test now. So what it's doing, it's actually firing up. I've got a series of tests over here in my Cypress folder. So under integration, I've got my tests. In our case here, I'm stubbing some of the data. So the really nice thing about doing visual tests, especially with Cypress, anybody using stubs right now currently with Cypress? Wow. So stubs is probably the most powerful thing with Cypress because what it allows me to do is go ahead and intercept the call as it starts to leave, as it leaves my application and Chrome is actually picking up the request to send that off, that I can go ahead and intercept that and return the exact data that I want to do. So why Cypress is really powerful then versus let's say a traditional Selenium-based tool is that in a Selenium-based tool, when I want to test edge cases, I either have to have a database that's got the values in it so that I can test my edge case, or I have to go create data. And what both of those do is those create more faults where we can potentially have problems. Really, I see a lot of people creating data, and that's what I've done historically. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the amount of time it takes to run the test, and I'm extending it 2 to 3 times. And then I have more and more timing issues to deal with, which then I get failures and whatnot. So stubbing is super powerful. So what I've done here is I fired up the Sci server and I declared a route. So when it goes, anybody tries to load articles recent on my API, I'm going to go ahead and return this article instead. So, and then I've got another one here about testing for tags, great. But let's come back over to Percy and go back to my new project. So now you can see we have an unreviewed change. So now we actually have something that needs to be looked at. The nice thing here is that if I submitted a PR for this and I did the Percy integrations, you would go ahead and say, hey, look, you can't go merge this. Someone needs to go look at this first. And so what's interesting here is we have 3 matching changes. You can see here on the right-hand side that the only thing that's changed is just the red there for the button. Here's what my original was. I can toggle back and forth between what is wrong and what the full image there is. And then the other thing here is, notice it went ahead and grouped. So even though we have 3 tests that are being run here, it's actually saying, hey, all 3 of these tests have the same exact issue. And so instead of having to go one by one, I can expand the matches and I can say, hey, look, I want to individually approve each one of these, or I can just go ahead and say, hey, approve those 3 changes, we're good to go. So now once I approve that, come back over here, you can see in our workflow here that I've got an approved status, we're good to go. So if we were to come back over here, put it back the way that it was, we have the same exact issue. When we run it. Now what Percy's doing here as well is it's taking these and it's uploading the images, so it's compressing the images and uploading them up into the cloud for you. So if you're running this on your CI box, you don't have to worry about trying to get the images down so you can look at them and they're already up there. Some other nice features that happen here that you wouldn't really notice is that it's also Cypress since we're doing it in a run mode and not an interactive mode, it's actually recording videos of all the tests that are being run, and then if any of the tests fail, it'll also capture a snapshot of that so you can see it later. So now we can come back over here again. Let's refresh. Oh, so here it's still uploading and processing those images, so it does have a little bit of a lag for this. And now we've got 3 unreviewed, 3 total out of 3 total snapshots. So same basic thing. I can see here's the change. It's gone back to green. This is our baseline. So you can see it's really easy to capture these types of changes without having to do a whole lot of work. Right here. So the main thing I hope that you get out of Percy here is that you realize that this is a really powerful tool that would make visual testing a lot easier, be very simple to integrate. They've got a really nice pricing model. They have some free tiers that you can use, and you don't have to pay anything to use it. You're just limited by the number of snapshots that you can capture. What I see is as organizations start to do this and they start to see the value, like, for the small cost per month of having this sort of workflow, it makes a lot of sense and catch a lot of small little visual errors before they make it into production. So it's definitely the Cadillac. You've got both options. You can do the free route using the Cypress regression, visual regression library. You're just going to be responsible for moving those images around. Otherwise, Percy is going to give you everything that you want in terms of the screen captures, stuff being up on the cloud, being able to see it mobile as well as in full screen mode, whatnot. So to me, what it really comes down to is this: find tools that work. There's other libraries out there as well, but find tools that work and find tools that are going to make your life easier as a developer, as a tester, and try to find things that you can integrate into your company quickly and simply and create value with what you guys are doing. So in the future, you find me, as I said earlier, as part of Angular Denver. It's a conference that we do usually the first week of August. This year I've been fortunate. I got to go out to Tel Aviv and speak at Europe, London at the International JavaScript Conference, and at NGConf. So if you're ever thinking about speaking, I highly encourage it. Submit a CFP. I know we'll be opening up one for Evening with Angular coming up in January. Would love to get your submission for that. We love local speakers. And with that, really quick about my company, Freebo. We do Angular training, consulting, and experts. So I'm an Angular GDE, a Google developer expert. And we have about 8 of us on staff that are all experts. So we'll help with Angular projects while they're not there for a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of months, or a couple of years. So we're here to help and make sure your projects are successful. Any questions? All right, go ahead.
So I saw that it took a little while that second time to take snapshots. Like, how many snapshots does it take before CI takes too long?
So the snapshot uploading is going to take a little bit of time, but I think part of it too here is that I don't really have that great of a internet connection. It really depends on what kind of connection that you have. I think they do a pretty good job of compressing those and whatnot. I think what we're seeing typically is that you might have to wait 5 minutes for those to process. So it's still pretty reasonable, especially if you compare it to, like 4 hours of a Selenium test might take to run, right?
For sure.
So.
I'm assuming there's just like different kind of component states too, to take snapshots of those, like maybe an open drop down or like a hover state for things.
Absolutely. So the great thing here is you have Cypress as your tool. And so with Cypress, you can pretty much do any DOM manipulation, clicking, hovering, blurring, anything. And so the nice thing here is that since you can use stubs as well, you can control the data. So I give an example quite often about why Cypress is really the tool of choice. Let's say you've got a product page, and when the product inventory drops below 10, and you're a manager, that you see a manager order form on the side that you can say, hey, let's order more. We need more widgets to come in, right? So how would you test that using WebDriver, Selenium, Nightcrawler, Protractor? You basically have to find either a product that has an inventory less than 10, log in as an admin, and kind of go through all this rigmarole, or you use stubs and say, hey, here's when for this task, we'll make this request, return this product that has an inventory that's sent to this. And then we can control that. And so we can do lots of, not only just what user interaction states are, but also when we have, these edge cases, super simple to test, we can visually capture that and make sure that it's doing exactly what we want.
So in that scenario where you were using stubs, that seems like that would sort of break the utility of the tool as like an end test because you're not really getting data back from the backend service.
Got it. That is one of the arguments that is made. So I would say this. You should be writing API tests to test the backend. The backend is technically a separate application. And our backends can be from multiple different sources that we're not writing tests against those. What we are really trying to do, I think, in end-to-end tests is we're trying to verify what user interactions, based on this data, should it do this, right? And does it perform the way that we want? The recommendation from the Cypress team is that you should write one true end-to-end test, what I would consider like a smoke test, to make sure that all my integration points are there. But if I'm really concerned about if the API is working and returning the correct data that it's supposed to, I would be writing tests specifically, for the API. But really, end-to-end, in my mind, is writing tests that are effective in testing the front end, and it's those integrations. So the other challenge here is that you say, okay, well, I really want this. You can still do that, and you can still use Cypress. You don't have to stub, but you're going to have the challenges of dealing with how do I test my edge cases, right? And the other caveat that people bring up with Cypress is currently right now it only works with Chrome. Okay, so you're not getting a full suite of browsers. But what I find is that most projects start out with this really great hurrah, like we're gonna do everything right this time, right? We're gonna write tests, man. We're gonna end to end. Everything's gonna be fantastic. And then we get in a bit of a pinch. The tests start failing, and management comes by 3 months later, like, hey, where's all those end-to-end tests we run? Yeah, we don't run those anymore.
No.
They don't even, we come in every morning, they're red, and it's a different test every day that's failing. But when I run it locally, it runs fine. And it's just these crazy timing issue hacks. So there's where we're currently at with most end-to-end testing tools. Versus if I could say I have 1,000 tests that are written in Cypress that I could guarantee and stake my life to that when those fail, they're actually failing, and they're dependable. So I think that's the trade-off. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you follow some kind of rule for like what you should snapshot, or do you just snapshot all the things?
I would not snapshot everything because of, it does decrease the performance. I'm looking for, really the main things I'm looking for is visual changes, okay? And so I would probably go through, in most cases, the rule is kind of like do one snapshot per feature or edge case. If there's an edge case that's bringing up a new visual element that we want to make sure hasn't changed, something along those lines. But I would not, it becomes a little bit of overkill if we're basically doing the same exact image with just slightly different data that doesn't impact it, like what's the point? So I would be a little more judicious with it.
Do you have to deal with clients that have the hard Internet Explorer requirement?
We do, no, but we do. I mean, historically, yes. Currently, I'm thinking, I'm like, do I have anybody? No, most companies have gone away from that. But in those cases, then I would recommend that you write a couple of Selenium tests to go in and test what, basically at least do some smoke tests to make sure that they work. With Edge, taking on the Chromium engine, that's, it's gonna be less and less, I think, going forward. But yeah, they're also currently, the Cypress team is working on using WebDriver to be able to control the browser so that they can test it, run Cypress tests on all their remaining browsers. So that is coming. The other nice thing, by the way, with Cypress as well is they have with their paid product, you can actually scale more tests across servers. And so much like what you could do with Sauce Labs, but all built in. So they gave an example where their tests were taking 25 minutes to run, and they were able to get it down to 2 minutes by scaling it across, I think, like 19 servers. So, and it's pretty cost affordable as well. But again, that is a challenge. Like if you do need Internet Explorer tests, you might consider writing a small amount of tests just to kind of cover your bases, if you will, using a Selenium-based tool like Reroute or something like that. Any other questions? All right, I'll stick around a little bit. If you have other questions, you'd like to come up and chat, be happy to talk with you. Thanks very much for coming today. Have a great time at development.